This is Into the Magic Circle by Ruby Schofield out of the University of Groningen. And this is in the Philosophy of the City journal. This came out last year, not too long ago. And so there's a special edition in this journal about like a night in the city. And never read this before. We're just evaluating it. I'm not endorsing it. So as always, feel free to ask questions in chat. I'm going to do my best to explain it, but this is my first time reading it, and we're just going to see how it goes. And as always, if you are here at the end of chat, we get to review it at the end, and the reviews are going to go up on our website. And so you get to spam emotes. Okay, so here we go. Into the Magic Circle. 1. Growing up in the club. Clubbing has been an important part of my life since I was a teenager. My close friend became a successful DJ when I was 15. We used to go backstage at clubs and festivals, and the promoters would give us grapes and fizzy drinks instead of beers because we were underage. Still, we'd dance all night long. When I'm in the club now, I sometimes feel how I remember feeling then, perhaps for the first time, like myself. I like loud, heavy music, dancing, and being together with other people. On good nights, I feel euphoric and unrestrained. Okay. Alright, so this is, this here is like, we're starting off with like an anecdote. It's like, what is this that is going on here? This is not your normal philosophy example, but that is not meaning it is that far away from any sort of normal philosophy either, because when you are euphoric and unrestrained, these are definitely ethical topics. And also, we're getting into aesthetics quick too. Is this an autoethnography? I don't know yet. I don't think so. I think what this is going to be saying how clubbing and night culture matter to cities. That's my guess at this point. So this is going to be an aesthetics of nightlife in cities. Okay. When I'm not in the club, you can find me doing philosophy. Yeah, see, switched very quick. I'm a PhD student, so I spend a lot of time in my head. It's my job to dissect arguments and contemplate abstract concepts, apparently. Here too, I listen to loud, heavy music, but I rarely feel euphoric and unrestrained, even on good days. Despite my best efforts to maintain at least the illusion of separation between these two worlds, they recently collided when I was sexually harassed on the dance floor of a club. Okay, so yeah, so this is interesting. So they were like trying to have a good time, and then they got sexually harassed, and then they're like, what's the ethics of this? Philosopher. This piece is an expression of those worlds meeting. It is the story of what unfolded, what often unfolds on the dance floor, and how I have come to make sense of it in the office. Okay, so maybe it is more of an ethnography. What's up, Vipers? Everyone's a philosopher on the come down. Yeah, that's fair too. It's like, oh man, I'm thinking about what I did last night. Music has played an important role here as the bridge between realms. The soundtrack to my experience in the club and the academic process has allowed me to make meaning of them. All that is to say, this story would be incomplete without a score. Thank you for the follow. With that, I invite readers to hit play on the accompanying playlist, listen along as well as we settle down and enter the magic circle. Now back to the dance floor. Okay, so we've actually, is this a link? I can't, wait. So here's the link. This is a Spotify link. I don't have Spotify in general. I don't have Spotify on this computer though either. So it's I don't have it in general. I don't have it on the computer. So if you guys want to listen to what this person is playing, this is the link that was just there. Okay. So the event in question was pretty run of the mill. A man, drunk, sweaty, feels it is his duty to grope various parts of your body as you walk past. A familiar tale for some. But I'd read the club's house rules on their website before it came. We have a zero tolerance party regarding any and every form of discrimination, aggression, harassment, or racism, it said. So for the first time, I decided to report the incident to the club's awareness team. Expecting decisive action, I was surprised to find myself instead embroiled in a series of complex and lengthy negotiations with all parties about whether the drunk man should be allowed to stay. He thought you were his friend, the floor manager told me. Maybe we can keep an eye on him, someone else offered. In the end, the decision was left to me. Whether the man should stay or go apparently hinged on whether I thought his presence would affect the remainder of my night. Suffice it to say, I went home. Back in my head, I began to ruminate on the incongruity between the club's advertised policies and the reality of my experience. Their bold claims about zero tolerance were undermined by what can only be described as, well, tolerance regarding a pretty straightforward case of sexual harassment. The purported safe space had proved illusory, and the club's failure to uphold its stated policies left me wondering what accounted for this dissonance. I mean, it should be pretty obvious that they want to not have people thrown out of their clubs. That's basically it. Because that, gets bad press. Usually. Unless they think the person is going to, sue them. And if they don't think they're going to sue them or make bad press, then they want more customers as opposed to less customers. But, yeah. But, see what the author says. The utopian discourse, clubbing as liberation. In the months that followed, I decided to put my philosophical skills to use and came to theorize my frustrations like this. In experiencing and reporting unsafety on the dance floor, I had fallen out of step with what we'll call the utopian discourse surrounding club culture. In a nutshell, the utopian discourse imagines the underground dance music club primarily as a site of liberation. In this view, underground clubs constitute a kind of nocturnal haven, a safe space where everyone is welcome, and the usual social divisions can be set aside. Okay, so this is fun. So it's you have a socially protected space, is what this is, from the outside social norms, and then so this one is something outside of that. Reportedly grounded in emancipatory transformative ideals like acceptance, inclusion, and freedom, these clubs are said to offer their participants an opportunity to escape from everyday urban life. In the club space, groups usually marginalized by social structures can engage in transgressive activities under the cover of darkness, away from the oppressive glare of real world, and obtain temporary relief from the socially imposed constraints that characterize everyday life. In short, the utopian discourse idealizes the club as a site of radical politics that is a liberatory space, quote, for those outcast by the prejudices of their society to have fun together and freely challenge the world on their own terms through music, sex, and pleasure, end quote. My experience, alongside that of many others, seemed to sit somewhere outside of this celebratory discourse. On that night, social divisions were not set aside but reinforced. I went home, the perpetrator and his friends stayed. The real world made its presence felt in the room. Liberation was not obtained. Zenmark says, see also raves, culture, peace, love, and unity, respect. Okay, interesting. Luminant says, it seems like the utopian discourse is the dream of the escape from norms, when in reality, what people want is different norms. Well, yes. I mean, we very rarely get to any sort of real ideal. It's just someone's different concept of it, what they want. It's the club owner wants to make money, the club manager doesn't want to throw people out, all that sort of stuff. That's a hassle and it causes work. I mean, the problem is when you're advertising the club as a safe space and then you get bad press because this guy groped me and they wouldn't do anything about it. That also does it, but it's people were being lazy and, bad. So, okay. The struggle between liberation and regulation. But I mean, actually I should comment on this. The overall idea of this clubbing as liberation, that there is a way to make a space within society that is open to, this sort of these transgressive ideals. We need Baraday here for this. But the idea you can do that, it is, why is that an ideal? Why do we need this sort of thing? Not criticizing the paper since I think that's where it's going. Yeah, that's fair. Illumin says, true, though I think it's fair criticism if they're advertising themselves as having a zero tolerance party for that. Yeah, that's the issue here. And it sounds like where the author is really, getting their philosophical sort of direction from. You're claiming one thing, that's sort of the idea here, and then in practice, it's not even close to that. So they're selling a philosophy, an ideal that they don't live up to. So they're hypocrites. Yeah. Liberation was not obtained. Dun dun dun. Oopsie. I want to do it in green anyway. The struggle between liberation and regulation. The utopian discourse conceals an unresolved tension in the heart of club safety. Whilst clubs can serve as transformative, potentially liberating spaces for marginalized people to express themselves and form collective bonds, they are also highly regulated sites that reproduce existing social norms and practices congruent with the repressive and marginalizing dynamics of the real world. Yeah, So again, you're just recapitulating the same bullshit. You're just doing it with a cool beat going on. Stockton says that's an interesting point about the business ethics of clubbing. Yeah. Frank says, but they are hypocrites in a way that pretty much everyone is hypocritical, is accepted that this hypocrisy is the norm. Yeah, but I think that's what Luminance was alluding to, is that if you explicitly say, I'm not going to do that thing, and then you do it, yes, you're a hypocrite, but they were like, you might expect some other kind of hypocrisy, but not that one, but that was one that, like, showed up. Hey, Cat Nick. Boy, there's a lot of unnecessary words here. Well, you're in philosophy, so... this is just part of... this is one of the job hazards you get. If you're going to read philosophy, there's a lot of words. Yeah. Frank says, I mean, it is the norm to say it explicitly and still ignore it. Fair. I mean, I'm not much on clubs, so it's like, everyone says it and everyone ignores it. It's like, okay. This claim is partly descriptive. Contra the utopian discourse. Okay, so Frank, the author is agreeing with you. Like, they're saying it's like, this is just how it is. They know that. Contra the utopian discourse, constraints and limitations may manifest in myriad demonstrable ways in the club space. Owing to discriminatory door policies, for example, racialized groups are often restricted from entering nightclubs, undermining the idealized claim that everyone is welcome in these spaces. Inside the club, social divisions are not set aside, but frequently enforced, as women and gender non-conforming people are often harassed and assaulted on dance floors. In fact, clubs are such intensely regulated spaces that the process begins long before clubbers even get to the door. Property developers and local councils regulate nightlife, but so do the clubs themselves, who have various profit-oriented incentives to regulate their audiences. Safe spaces for white middle-class audiences enable higher revenues. Yeah, and this is what I and chat has been saying. Frank says, they say explicitly to create a vibe that will be safe, not because they expect to actually enforce it. Yeah. Cass says, let's write a philosophy paper definitively proving what is the most authentic form of pizza. We don't need that. It's obvious. QED. Cass says, Burton trained Russell. Thus, I prove the only pure pizza is Neapolitan. I mean, yes, but he was British, so what would he know about food? Stockdown says, and I would like to critique this article outright, that liberation and that is a temporary experience of expressionism. Fair. I mean, maybe this person is just not good enough in their understanding of liberation at all, even if this is what people in this space claim it to be, like music and clubbing as a form of liberation. But that's fair. Okay. Then Mock says, it would be interesting in contrast with the bottom-up illegalist self-regulation of raves, where the existence of the event is tenuous. If someone calls an authority, the party's over, so we would expect fewer bystanders, etc. Yeah, I mean, that is always a thing. If, like, you are at an illegal club, then you all have to have, like, a social contract to enforce, like, the rules together, because you can't call the outside authorities. So there's a thing about that. There's no clubbing outside that business. Yeah, Russell be the... blown the fuck out. Yep. Yeah, I would not be surprised if Twix said that's an offensive comment. Maybe they don't like BTFO. What is BTFO? I don't know. Like, is that so bad? Is it blown the fuck out? Maybe it's something else. I don't even know anymore. Like, blown the fuck out. Yeah. Like, okay, maybe it's taken on worse connotation somewhere. I mean, I feel like BTFO is... Maybe it's under the dismissive policy here, but like I mean, like BTFO is like on par with LMAO. Like it's the same sort of like, what the fuck? Okay, aside from being at odds with the empirical reality of the club as a highly regulated experience, the utopian discourse also fails to accommodate the more normative claim that, in different ways, clubs ought to be regulated, at least insofar as the safety of their participants depends on the existence of rules and their consistent enforcement. I'm thinking here again about the obvious requirement for a zero-tolerance approach to instances of sexual assault and harassment in the club space. Whilst generally recognized as necessary in theory, such policies, as we have seen, can be implemented reluctantly or not at all by nightlife producers who might be invested in maintaining an idealized notion of their club as a kind of nocturnal haven. Yeah, and so this is interesting here. You might like the idea of liberation, but nocturnal haven on its own is not so like that might not be the nicest idea. Like it might be like, creatures of the night who are a little scary. Maybe you want a little bit of like scariness. Maybe you like the allure of the gangster or the people with like drug deals and bad things. Like not everyone is friendly, and maybe you like that danger. So that's part of the thing. Maybe the idea that like things are a little dangerous is part of the allure there. All acronyms are offensive, correct. Heidegger literally does say that. Yeah. Lumen says he has a whole thing being mad about university abbreviations like NYU. That's weird. That's weird. People are going to use shortcuts at times, and people who make up words like comportment do not get to yell at people about just shortening their terms. Like comportment, really? Please. Come on. Go comport yourself some acronyms, Heidegger. Unreal says, well, part of the allure of nighttime activities alone with a friend or in big groups is to be a bit outside norms, regulations, observant eyes of the greater society. Absolutely. And so it's like you're saying you're making a safe space, but then you're also being outside the norms. It's like, well, these things are not contradictory, but in tension. Okay. Expanding on this idea, we might go so far as to say that the right kind of regulation is a prerequisite not only for safety, but for liberation too. Take queer clubs, for example. Organizers often implement door policies and employ trained staff to screen out certain groups and behaviors, aiming to protect the club's purpose as a place, quote, where marginalized people feel prioritized and where they are in communion, end quote. This needs to exclude and regulate in pursuit of liberation need to exclude and regulate in pursuit of liberation is obscured by the utopian discourse, which smooths over social divisions with unifying appeals to inclusivity. Yeah, and this is the tension. You are trying to make a safe space for a smaller group of people, but if you include everyone, it can't be safe for those people. And so this is this is good. Like here, what they were saying right over here. Lumen says, yeah, I feel like mid-20th century origins of this was about the danger element being good, liberation as in radical freedom form norms, and now people kind of recognize, oh wait, that's probably going to intensify oppressive structures. Yeah. This is one of those, the paradox of, transparency. I was reading something about this a few years back. If everything in the government's transparent, it actually only benefits those in power, because the people in power then know everything that's going on and no one can resist them, or something along those lines. So it's like you need to be able to have spaces away from prying eyes. You don't want everything to be so transparent, because the people in power will use that against everyone else. It becomes a surveillance state very quickly. You're like, oh, we want to make sure no one's breaking any laws. Fine, but if the laws are set up to benefit only a certain group, and then everything else is in view, no one else can push back. So I made up this word in chat, mustness, a few messages back, like linguistic liberation is access to a ton of liberties. Yes. There is always the problem of reference, though. People might not know what you're talking about if you just make up words and don't tell people anything about it. Lumen says, yeah, Heidegger's abbreviation thing is pretty silly. I like how you called him H right there. But he has one random lecture where he goes off on an example of how we're so obsessed with efficiency now that it's filtered down into the smallest aspect of our language. Yeah, if you're going to be crazy about your acronyms, sure. That's over efficiency. Like, if you want to call your school New York University and write NYU because New York in university is a big fucking word, NYU is 3 letters long, that's fine. Everyone knows what you're fucking talking about. You only reference him as H now? I don't even realize I abbreviated him in the comment. Yeah. In my notebooks, Wittgenstein is W, Heidegger is H. Hegel I usually write out. Sometimes I mention Kant, but I write that out. Sometimes I write Kafka too. But it's the most people that you see in my notebooks are W for Wittgenstein and H for Heidegger. So it's always W and H and stuff. It says W said this, H said that. It's yeah. Your context presupposes the definitions. Well, your context might presuppose the definition, Sock now. Everyone else's context might be slightly different. We might not get it right. You wish you could have seen people watching lectures at 2x speed. Was Tinderos here? I think Tinderos does 3x speed. Wagner, yeah, 2 Vs. Okay, yeah. But I like this point the author just made, that the utopian universalizing idea is actually not going to fly when you're trying to make a space for marginalized people because they need to be separated from the group, or else the group will like trample them. Like everyone else will trample them over. If anyone doesn't know, the professor wife's ex, she has a friend who is a sex and intimacy coach. Last night on the professor's wife X, who is Prof's better half, the professor's wife X. If you don't know Katie, this is Prof's wife. She streams. She has a friend who does sex and intimacy, and she was actually telling a story about how she was going to a nightclub and had some very interesting, novel experiences at a gay club with her boyfriend. And so, but Katie is also trying to get to 1,000 followers. So give Katie a follow. But like, yeah. So if you want to talk about like weird clubbing experiences, next time she has what's her name on? Oh man, I'm blanking. Sorry, I lose names when I get stream. But like, yeah. Tandera says, well, last time I downloaded my paper and listened to the fastest speed Microsoft Word, which was 2x. Oh, you said 3 last time, I thought. Sorry. I apologize, Tandera. Does that make Prof her worse F? Yes, it does, Luminance. Follow. There you go. Heidegger is crying in his nearby grave. Yeah. Well, Heidegger can go to hell for all I care. He's a fucking shitty human. Like, yeah, good metaphysician, shitty human. Like, he can cry all he wants. Okay. Okay. Clubs, then, are not only liberatory spaces, but complex sites of ambivalence. They occupy an ambiguous space characterized by constraint and spontaneity, control, and the freedom to lose it from time to time. Yeah, see, like, again, this is interesting. The freedom to lose it from time to time. This is still the utopian thing that you can just somehow escape society. I mean, so, constraint and spontaneity, control, and the freedom to lose it from time to time. This ongoing negotiation between liberation and regulation, is concealed by the utopian discourse, which fails to see the club space in all its complexity. We need to do more, however, than just resign ourselves to the notion that it's complicated. We need a new narrative. Truth, yeah. Okay. Enter the magic circle, the club as playground. Okay, so this is getting a little bit more playground, like an adult playground. Okay. To better understand this tension between regulation and liberation, we can conceptualize the club not in idealized terms as a liberatory space, but rather as a playground, or more specifically, a magic circle. First deployed by Dutch cultural historian Johan Huizinga in his book Homo Ludens. Okay, so this is where we were going to the game theory, not game theory, theory of games. The term magic circle is used to describe a space in which play takes place. Huizinga writes, all play moves and has its being within a playground marked off beforehand, either materially or ideally deliberately as a matter of course. The arena, the card table, the magic circle, the temple, the stage, the screen, the tennis court, the court of justice, the Twitch chat, I would add, etc. are all in form and function playgrounds, that is, forbidden spots, isolated, hedged around, hallowed, within which special rules obtain. All are temporary worlds within the ordinary world, dedicated to the performance of an act apart. End quote. So, for all you Twitch streamers out there, and I know some of you guys are, you know all the mod tools that go into Twitch chat. Also, like, what can happen in, like, Twitch chat is its own weird little space. Is very much, Twitch itself is the gamification of internet chat. That's what Twitch is to me in a very abstract sense. And so, like, this sort of, like, interaction here with me and the PDF and chat, like, this is all a kind of a game, is a gamified thing, where Twitch is basically trying to get you to spend money to promote engagement here. But like, yeah, this all fits with this sort of like thing we're doing right now. Huizinga is old school historiography, where Shane, yeah, that's fair. Aris says, I wish this person would have talked about the club or space more. It depends a ton. Swingers clubs are more permissive. BDSM clubs are kinky but have many rules. Bathrooms might be more seedy than dance floors. And regular old straight clubs pretty well reflect society. That's fair, Aris. I mean, this is like, you have to understand something too. The end is right here. We're already at the end of the paper. This is a 5-page work. This is not a major release. So this is what, I mean, and also this is a PhD student, so they weren't like, this isn't like, This is like feels like a side project of theirs. So it's a little bit of fun getting some ideas out there. But like, yeah, if you want to do like this has got some really good ideas. I feel your pain. You're like, damn, I wish they had just said like a bit more and we could like sink our teeth into it, but that's just not what this is. Yeah, the degree of deviance or libertarianism ranges a ton. Yeah. And so there's definitely a lot more to say here. But this is why I like philosophy of the city. Like, I got into this, like, the theory of place. Like, where are you? What's going on? Like, so there's a huge amount of just, like, related ideas that are here. And so it's like, is this a good paper on its own? Sure, this is fine. It got published. It's nice. We can talk about it at the end. Is there more that could be said here? Yeah, a lot more could be done on this. Okay, here we go. Yeah. In Huizinga's terms, play describes a voluntary activity executed within certain fixed limits of time and space according to rules freely accepted by players. Twitch chat. The aim of play is to play itself, which is accompanied, he writes, by a feeling of tension, joy, and the consciousness that it is different from ordinary life. The magic circle refers to the boundaries within which this play takes place. A material or conceptual temporary world dedicated to the act apart, magic circles are not given spaces but are constructed and negotiated by players. The actions of these players are often defined in relation to special meanings, rules, conventions that cannot easily be transferred to the surrounding contexts. Twitch chat. Yeah. It's a paper for people who write papers. I got 2 ideas already. Yeah. Well, this is why I like this topic. I think it's fun. Like, I like philosophy of the city because I think it touches on so many aspects of modern life and stuff. Yeah. Velvet Underground type paper. Yeah. So, but again, what are we talking about here? These are perennial topics we like. We like games. We've talked about C.T. Nguyen a million times on like philosophy roulette and like related, like Aris talks about him, other philosophy streamers talks about him, like stuff like that. Like Baraday was reading a game on philosophy of games, a book on philosophy of games not that long ago, and I was telling him, oh, you should go read C.T. Nguyen's books about games and art. He was like, okay, I'll put that on the list. So like this is stuff. People on Twitch like games, I know. Aristotle says the author is doing a solid job of characterizing Huizinga. His book Homo Ludens is a low-key mess. Yeah, it's funny. I've only seen people refer to Huizinga. No one actually like deals with him a lot. I guess maybe that's because it's a mess. I did not know that. That's funny though. Yeah. Okay. Let's imagine the club as a magic circle, a space where play takes place. Just as Huizinga describes, the club is marked off both materially by its walls and doors and ideally by a shared understanding of its purpose. That is to say, participants understand that within this separate space, they are free to engage in activities and behaviors they might not ordinarily engage in, behaviors and activities that might take on a different meaning in the real world. The separateness offers them a kind of transcendence, an opportunity to go beyond the limitations that characterize the space outside and escape from the mundanity, norms, binaries, and routine. Lumen says, I just know him as the mandatory site in game studies papers. Haha. Okay, yeah. Blood Clown, welcome in. I have no idea if that's English or some other language, but please only write in English because I can only moderate English. Blood Clown. So it's like, I don't know what that is. But I hope you're well, and if that's just like your cat typing on the keyboard, which sometimes does happen, hello, Blood Clown cat, and welcome in. Hope you're well. Sockness is more about the philosophy of fun rather than liberation. I can give it to them as a personal liberation in a sense of hobby outing, but it's not really the concept that I think we mean in philosophy by liberation, this social political philosophy. No, that's fair. Like, it's not going to be a political liberation here. This is going to be a personal liberation. That, though, is not so bad, you know? Like, what's wrong with a personal liberation on this case? So yeah, Sockdown continues, mentality of liberation. So some of what she says, yeah, I do have some of the stuff you could probably presuppose as psychology, understanding it from that portion, but I just don't feel like she's reaching to the concept. He's giving her a philosophical journal, one that she writes in her diary, not something that is appealing to arguments. You know, that's fair, but you also have to allow people the wider understanding of liberation. Like, just being personally liberated is something people talk about. Now, is that more self-helpy? Yes. Is philosophy self-helpy? Also, yes. Okay, so if Tindarios understands, then there we go. On Tindarius to tell me what's going on. Zenmux says the Magic Circle is also one of my favorite games. You are the hero of an unfinished fantasy game. Seize the tools of game development rather than traditional puzzles with a single solution. The incomplete state of each environment is a question that you answer in your own way. Interesting. Okay, so we've got everyone's talking. I have no idea what's going on now. That's fine. I don't have to know what's going on. At first glance, this conceptualization of the club as a magic circle might seem like a reiteration of the utopian discourse. The suggestion that the club space is distinct from the real world or ordinary life seems to promise a magical transcendence or freedom for players. And you see, this is what I'm talking about, Sock, now. The promise of a magical transcendence or freedom for players. This is a local liberation, not a social one. It's like, but that's not necessarily wrong. May not be what you want, but it's not inherently wrong to talk this way. Transcendence or freedom for players that could be characterized as utopian. There's a crucial difference, however. The liberation afforded to participants in the club space, understood as a magic circle, is not absolute. Yeah, see? It's a different kind of thing. Not absolute. We're not doing the full social liberation. It exists within and is constrained by the meanings, norms, and rules that constitute the magic circle. Okay, you just said computer says no? Thanks. Awesome. Thank you, Tindarius. Zenimax says, one of the characters is voiced by James Urbaniak, Dr. Venture from the Venture Bros. Fun. Okay. Aris says, the author doesn't have space, but gay clubs, for example, are part of political liberation. They become sites for imagining and rehearsing liberation in the full political sense. But if you hold that, you can't isolate the club space from the political space. The magic circle is a bit more porous than I think. Okay. So yeah, we've got overlap between the two kinds of liberation here then, and that's correct. So like this is the personal liberation here, and what Sakno and Aris are talking about is there's going to be a wider social liberation also. And so we've got two different kinds of liberation going on, and I mean the liberation the club provides is going to be personal and maybe a meeting space for a wider liberation too, but the club itself is not making the wider liberation. I mean, we've got the Stonewall Inn here in New York, which famously started the riots that led to a lot of gay rights here. Like, trans woman threw a rock at the police. It's like, that's New York culture for you. Like, that's what started riots that got gay rights going. So, is that saying that the Stonewall Inn was the center of a social movement? Yes. Now, is the Stonewall Inn, what was the liberation that it participated? Well, it was a flashpoint for trans, gay rights, etc. here in New York. And I'm not an expert on this, so if I say something stupid, let me know. But the liberation, so in some sense, that's not what liberated all the people. That was a meeting point for that person's, I forget her name, I'm sorry, her throwing the rock at cops, which started the riot that led to laws changing. But yeah, so but the idea that you're actually going to make a revolution in the Stonewall Inn, well, the Stonewall Inn's not a very big place. You're not making a revolution there. You're not changing the laws in the Stonewall Inn. I was up in Newport, Rhode Island a year or two ago, and there was the White Horse Tavern is a tavern where General Washington and Rochambeau plotted against the British, the Crown. They were all British. They plotted against the Crown for the American Revolution. And so it's that gave them space to be personally liberated. From there, they took it wider, though. Stockton says, yes, Stonewall wasn't rehearsed. It was a sporadic unification and direct action. Marshall Johnson, yeah. I'm sorry. Sorry if I offended the Irishmen in chat when I said we were able to rebel against the Crown. I apologize if any Irish were offended by the colonialist working in concert with the French against the British monarchy. Sorry, Vipers. Yeah. Okay, but thank you, Iris, for Marshall Johnson. Should say her name. But yeah, it's the liberation being talked about here in this paper is personal. That can be expanded, but the club itself is not making a revolution. I know you're British for this one. Is funnier. It is funnier. Okay. Well, it works either way. You could be offended that we revolted and you guys didn't, or you could be offended because you're British, but fine. Okay. The sense of liberation that participants may experience is therefore not unlimited but structured by a set of rules, some explicit like those laid out by club management, for example, no violence, no harassment, and others implicit like the social norms that dictate how people interact on the dance floor or at the bar. Crucially, these rules are not just imposed from above, they are co-created by community clubbers themselves. Regulars, for example, might have developed an unspoken code of conduct regarding personal space on the dance floor. The liberation experienced in the club is therefore a controlled or regulated freedom where the boundaries of what is acceptable are both defined and enforced by the community and by the structure of the club environment itself. And this is the fun part. Like, we were also reading Hegel a few weeks ago, and this is sort of the Hegelian claim that people, once you're like a regular, you're in the social circle, then you are negotiating the rules yourself. So this is a Hegelian point that Brandon was making. Luminen says also the question of the gay club liberating by allowing the transgression of norms, but then do we, and if so, how much, want to allow the transgression of all norms? Some of the more radical positions were that we really do want freedom from all norms, but then that immediately leads to the question of, for example, abuse happening inside those spaces. Yeah, like that's part of the issue. And this is what, like I was just saying, the Hegel is, we're negotiating it once you're into the space, but do we really want radical freedom? I don't think radical freedom is what we want. Actually, on Professor YFX stream last night, God, I'm blanking on her name. I'm so sorry. But she was saying you want radical acceptance. You don't want radical freedom. You want radical acceptance. And that's what you want in some of your safe spaces. You want to be accepted for who you are, not that like everything is allowable. You want to be accepted though, like radically for who you are. And it's not the same thing. Hegel, notorious raver, completely. I guess so, Unreal Brian. So it's like, yeah, we definitely don't want yeah, you're glad the Brandon paper made an impact? Yeah, it's one of those things is like, I like my metaphysics, so I do like, and I do appreciate Hegel, but I haven't had time to really look into excuse me. I've not had time to look into Hegel. Okay. Questions remain, however, concerning the validity of the claim that there can be a meaningful separation between play and ordinary life, as the Magic Circle stipulates. Critics have pointed out that the boundary between real and synthetic worlds is not sealed but permeable, as chat was saying, with people crossing it all the time in both directions, carrying their behavioral assumptions and attitudes with them. End quote. In light of our desire to establish a framework for understanding the club as a complex site of ambivalence, as opposed to a consequence-free safe space somehow distinct from the oppressive structures that constitute ordinary life, this concern regarding the validity of the boundary between play and non-play is particularly relevant. And so this is exactly what chat was going on about right there. How much freedom do we actually want? For many critics, the validity of this boundary is contested on account of the fact that players have a history of pushing against it. In other words, harmful, dangerous, and transgressive play, particularly in that which appears to reproduce real-world dynamics, poses a challenge to the notion that playgrounds can be considered separate or apart from the ordinary world. To come full circle, so to speak, we might conclude that incidents of sexual harassment like the one I experienced discredit the claim that there can be any meaningful boundary between the temporary world within the club and the ordinary world outside. Indeed, as I walked out of the door that night, confused, frustrated, exhausted, the space I had left behind ceased to feel like much of a playground to me. All is not yet lost, however. On my understanding, the Magic Circle is not a closed or sealed space, and the playground is not a magical wonderland. The boundary between play and non-play is not clear-cut, but rather an imperfect separation subject to ongoing... so this is just a hand wave away at the end. But what are you going to do? Imperfect separation subject to ongoing processes of negotiation and modification from players. Coming to understand the Magic Circle in this way as the boundary which players negotiate, again, this is the Hegelian line, has helped me make sense of my frustrations. It was not the players pushing against the boundary that destroyed the Magic Circle that night, but the club's failure to enforce that boundary in the face of such encroachments. Bad, harmful, transgressive play draws attention to the boundary that surrounds play. Far from destroying that boundary, it makes it visible. Okay, yeah, so in identifying the boundary, that is the problem, because people were trying to negotiate it. So this is actually a little bit more of a complex claim right here. In other words, bad play asks the player a question. What is acceptable here? Simply sending the perpetrator home would have given him and me an answer. That behavior is not acceptable here. This is a space where play takes place. Loading image address. What do we got? A Discord thing? What's up, Sam? Is the magic circle euphemism for pussy? It can be, depending on, it can be. Let's see what we got. Oh my god. And as always, it breaks. There we go. It was like, hey, this is Hegel at the club. Hegel at the club. I think that's what this is. There we go. Understanding the club as a magic circle and the magic circle as the boundary which players negotiate has allowed me to realize something else too. My choice to report the incident and my group's repeated and sustained efforts to get them to take it seriously was a collective attempt to shape and protect the boundaries of play. Although in some ways unsuccessful, I think it was an attempt to say there's something worth preserving here. In a world that looks increasingly atomized, the club serves as a potential site for social connection, a sacred and necessary space for collective experiences characterized by joy, pleasure, spontaneity, and exploration. In short, it was an attempt to say this is a space where play takes place and we are dedicated to the performance of an act apart. Yeah, Hegel at the club. Love that flow. Tindera says Germans have to be given a permit for revolt, otherwise they won't. Yeah. But anyway, that was this paper. This was Into the Magic Circle. And as always, we rate the paper in the end. What do you think about it? You let me know. Spam some emotes. And we have some emote categorizations. If you're new here, here's how it goes. We have some better TTV emotes, so everyone's available. They're available to everyone to use them. You just need to install plugin. It'll help you all over Twitch if you don't have it. Like that one or the 7Z or whatever, Frankerface. But whatever. If it was fun and made your brain dance, and that's what people were saying, that this gave them a lot of ideas, maybe brain dance. Spelling and capitalization count here, so please get it right. Nog Scream, if it talked about existential or artistic drama, I mean, maybe that would be a good choice here. Nog Oro, Ouroboros for deeper ancient ideas. Nog Knife for slicing and dicing arguments. Nog Navel, if it's navel-gazing only for academics. Nog Turd for all style, no substance, still poop underneath. And Nog Grapes for big claims that shrivel up. You can also use the global vote yay and vote nay of Twitch. And I have my vote meh. Note that all the emotes in green at the top will make, I do calculate an overall score, will make the score go up. The ones in red will make it go down. And the vote meh will actually make it go to the middle. And if you reuse emotes, I take that into consideration. Tindario said, what a weird way to rant about a club. Gave it a nay. That's cool. Unreal. Brian gave it a brain dance and a Hegel rave. Unfortunately, a Hegel rave is not an actual thing here. Zenemox says, finally remembered the continental term from Foucault. Heterotopia. Interesting. Frank says, what good does it to understand it as a negotiation? Yes, sexual harassment might correctly be called negotiating in this case, but it's fucking wrong. That's not the argument here, though. The argument is, what kind of thing is it to have a club, and what kind of stuff goes on there? Now, we know that sexual harassment shouldn't be allowed, but if you were going to have, like, say, an artistic space where people are allowed to do more things than they normally are allowed to do, then how do we actually allow for people to have more freedoms without having bad ones as well? And so that's the question here. What is it for us to have a dance space? Because a dance space falls under aesthetics. And that's the question. This is not like a painting studio. This is a dance space where you have a collective act of dancing, where you have like a club where there's like the whole thing where you have a dance floor, and like if everyone's dancing together, that's kind of like a collective artistic act. So that, how do you actually manufacture that kind of experience for those people and that sort of artistic act in itself? Aris gave it a meh, Zenemonk gave it a yay, Zenemonk also gave it a brain dance and a scream. Thank you. Lumen said, yeah, Foucault is someone who I had in mind about more radical ideas of liberation, which leads to his support for some positions that are pretty controversial today, to say the least. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the issue. People, if you really take your philosophy seriously, a lot of times you get bad results. I mean, that's, everyone knows about trolley problems. Everyone knows about Kant and not lying when you've got a Nazi at the door. So it's like, you get these weird results, and like that does happen. So it's like, yeah, Foucault has issues. And Luminance says liberation must be total liberation from the norms. Yeah, and so like not all norms are They're norms for a reason. We like it when you're like not abusing people. It's like that's usually a bad thing. I mean, if you're BDSM and you like it and it's all consensual, have your fun. But like otherwise, no. Yeah. Ira says, cool ideas, but the thesis needs more precision and the ideas need more space. Things to talk about are different kinds of spaces, types of liability, of responsibility, due process, how permeable play spaces are to political spaces, and on what bases. Obviously, you can't do all that in paper, but you got to try. Yeah, you know, this was, to be fair to this author, they put this in like the small section after the main articles. So this is sort of like, these are the notes in some sense. This was like you got published, but we're not like, this was in sort of like the kids table of the journal here. So it was that's fair. Like, yeah, there's a lot that could be said. Tindari says, once I got sexually harassed at a festival, I wouldn't put it on the festival themselves. Some people just got issues, behave like total jerks. Yeah, well, that's 100% like you're right. The author here, though, was the real issue wasn't that they got harassed. It was the club's response to the harassment that is what the basis of this paper was. What was the club supposed to do in face of the harassment? And when the club didn't do as the author thought they ought to have done, then it became a problem for them, because then they were like, well, what is the club at all if they don't enforce their rules like they said? So that's the issue. Frank doesn't think they went anywhere? Yeah. Fair. I mean, they described the issue, I guess you might say. It may not have, like Aris also complained, needs a lot more development. Sure. Aris would read a book about this. Yeah, so again, like the philosophy of like nightlife and like clubbing could be a cool fucking anthology in itself. And this person could write this in a much more extended form, and that would be great. Frank said the club was supposed to enforce the rule they explicitly announced, still holds true in this magic circle. Well, at the end, and in defense of the author, I don't know if I should be defending them here. In the end, they were saying, and I did highlight it, I know you can't see it anymore. This, where was it? This claim right here. This was slightly more sophisticated. I know you can't see, but when they said bad, harmful, transgressive play draws attention to the boundary that surrounds play. Far from destroying that boundary, it makes it visible. That is a further claim. That actually shining light on these weird spaces does something to them. And that's actually rather sophisticated when you're saying, even by this sort of like thing that happens that make it obvious what's going on, that changes the dynamic. This needs to be much more developed as an idea. This is just they reference someone else. What that actually is doing in the way that when you shine the light on the club changes your understanding of it. That needs a lot more work. But yeah, Sakna says poop, grapes, scream, and meh. Sure. I mean, did not like it. I will give her some more time for her next papers. Just think she needs to take her time. I understand she has notes for it. Yeah. One concept that you love, but you find she needs to get developed. Think it was just rushing to get done probably for work life, university, something quick. Yeah. PhD student. This was a side project. Absolutely. Lumen says, I don't think the paper is actually about the club. It was just an example to start the discussion. Fair. Yeah, sometimes that's what it is. You have an example you want to talk about. The example happened to be about an experience at the club. Unreal says, might be worth an emote. Brain Dance may cover it, but I think it's slightly different. Paper that may or may not be good in itself, but opens the conversation is really worthwhile to open. I think such papers are quite worthwhile. No, see, you can Brain Dance and then give it a nay. I mean, that's my concession here. I can't make a million emotes, but you can also give it like Brain Dances, but say it was a bad paper. Really interesting, but like not a good philosophy. So it's like, it's a little bit like, yeah, it's a trade-off on how many emotes I have. Like, I think that's right, but you can just sort of like do it. So Tindaris gave it, a golden turd. Yep. Also deserves credit, Ara says, because they see all of these objections wave at them. But 5 pages though. Yeah, a lot of hand waves. So bye. Gotta go. Frank says there's a difference between a space with different negotiated norms and a space where people just do shit and claim they misunderstand the new norms after the effect. A lack of explicitly negotiation necessarily favors bad actors. Yeah, and that's on the club management there. You're absolutely right. So, but like all the other stuff that's going on here, it's like, yeah. Brian says the chat tries to make me make more emotes. I resist the audience capture. That's correct. Yeah. All right, what am I gonna say? Yeah, this is fun. I'm gonna give it a brain dance. Give it two brain dance. No, not Brian dance. Brain dance. Give it two Brian dance. Yeah, like vote meh because like yeah, that's part of the issue. It was fun, but it was it was just a little too floaty, you know? Like it talked about the stuff, it didn't dig into anything. It didn't make a strong enough claim in the end about what it was. So it could give you like I understand the grapes there, but like it didn't even make any big claims. It just kind of floated. And that's what it was. It wasn't yeah, it just kind of floated. Now, not to say I think this is fun paper. I think people should read it, get some ideas in how these sorts of things be negotiated, but I don't really have a whole lot more to say that. Like maybe we could talk about like I could give it a Nog Scream. Yeah, like maybe I'll do that cuz it is kind of like well, is this existentially or artistic? It kind of falls under that. But like I'm going to give it another vote mad then to like even it out. Lumen says the paper was claiming here's an analysis of a club's work or something. I'd say it shriveled up. Yeah, and that's kind of what it was. Like the grapes are a very fair rating on this. But like I don't even think it made that claim. Like what was the claim? No, I don't even think it made that. So it was like a thing saying that clubs are a space for liberation, and I think that's fair, but like they didn't actually make a very strong claim, so there wasn't a whole lot to shrivel up. It was just sort of like, yeah. Ara says it would be a fun paper to teach, to be honest. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, but like good ideas, then you could like set all your students off and be like, all right, you guys take this idea, run with it. You guys take this idea, run with it. You guys take this idea, run with it. Then develop the ideas. Lumen says, but I think it was only claiming actual practice is in tension with the ideas that informs clubs ideologically. Yes, I think that's right. But like that's a very floaty thing. That's what I mean by floaty. It's like the practice is in tension with the ideas. Oh, you don't fucking say. Like the world's a non-ideal place. Not a big claim there. Yeah. Perils of breaking might coming up into two parts. Yeah. Well, problem with Twitch chat is the concession is that I can speak faster than you can type into chat. Zenimax says, here's a tool that works on this thing. Remainder left as exercise to reader. Exactly. QED, you can figure it out. But okay. If anyone else wants to get anything else said, now's the time. Yeah. So. But yeah. Let me know. But like, I thought it was fun. Granted, I have a soft spot for like philosophy of the city. That's why we read this article in the first place, because I was talking about this journal as like something I want to read something in. So it's like I have a soft spot for this stuff. So be it. I like these papers where they take unusual topics and give a little philosophical analysis, something that I wouldn't normally be thinking about. I have a soft spot for this. It's like, okay, yeah. Lumen says, sure, it's a small claim, but for that reason, I think it didn't shrivel up. Shrivel up mostly delivered on its premise. Yeah, that's why I didn't give it the grapes, because a lot of papers make big claims and then they shrivel up. This one didn't make big claims, but like it didn't make that many claims either. So it's like, all right, wasn't great. Frank says, Aris phrase, sites for imagining and rehearsing deliberation made me think about lots of fun, interesting things. The paper should have tried to do likewise. You know, this is the best some people can do in the time and space that we have. It's like, yeah.